longer than it says. Okay, so let's see.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Julieanne Kost. Welcome. We're going to be talking about compositing today. And I'm just going to start by sharing my screen here so we can see it. All right. I'm going to share my entire screen and let's just head right over to Photoshop. So actually, I'm going to start in Lightroom Classic. So here we are, and this is the image that we're going to create today. This I think adorable polar bear driving this little old MG. So here are the images that we are going to use. Most of these images, if I go to survey mode, most of these images are mine. So the reindeer, the crown, the polar bears and everything. The only one that I actually created was this one down here in the lower right. And we're going to walk through how I created that and how we can make this composite. But before we get started, I just want to mention a few things. These are just things to consider. So it doesn't really matter if you're making a like a realistic composite or a surrealistic composite. These items are going to help your viewer kind of enable them to just walk into the photograph. There won't be anything jarring that will set them apart from it. So the first one's pretty obvious, the color tone, contrast, and density. When I think about density, I think about density and shadows specifically. So if you are combining multiple images from multiple sources taken with different light sources, you want to be careful that the shadows are going to match across all of your images. Also, the direction and quality of light. Now, if you're a photographer, that's fantastic because you can actually make your own photographs and make sure that you are being consistent in your lighting. One thing to be very careful of, if you do flip an image and that image has a logo in it or something, then you want to make sure that you retouch out maybe that logo or the text will be backwards. Also, structure, texture, and resolution is very important when you're taking images maybe from different cameras that have different resolutions. They're shot at different ISOs. They're going to have different either grain, size, or feel to them. So I'm going to show you how we can add an image to help kind of unify all of the different structure and texture and resolutions of images that we're going to be using. Focus and depth of field. Again, if you're the photographer and you're out shooting for an image that you're going to composite, just try to make sure you get everything you want in focus. It's so much easier, of course, to make things go out of focus by blurring them than it is to bring something back into focus. Also, reflections and shadows. We're going to talk about that. We're going to walk through it, and scale and perspective. So, those are just some things to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and get started. So, here I am in Photoshop. And I have pinned my contextual taskbar right up here in the upper right so it doesn't keep jumping around. I find this incredibly useful. You can click on the three dots there if you want to either unpin it or reset the position, but I find that I don't usually have a lot of stuff up here in the upper right, and that's quite nice to pin it just right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I've got a lot to get through. We're going to start with this background. So when I'm creating a composite, I like to try to set the stage first, right? So I'll have an idea in mind, and it's fine. This is just, the way I work, and so I'm sharing it. Hopefully it'll be helpful. If you just start, putting images together, that's fine too, but I do try to have some kind of concept or idea that I'm aiming to reach. I can always change directions, but it's helpful for me to have some kind of structure. So my structure is first try to build a stage, like a theater or a set, and then I put in my primary subject and then any supporting subjects, and then I will unify it. So right now, let's say I'm at the beginning of creating this composite. I'm not really sure where I want to go with it, but I do know that I want the ice to kind of have a lower horizon. So when I put my primary subject in there, they're going to be above the horizon. So I've got that layer targeted in my layers panel, and we can tap the G key. That'll give us our gradient tool. And I'm just going to add a mask to this layer using the mask icon on the layers panel. And then over here, we can right click or control click on Mac and reset the tool. So if you ever have a tool that's not behaving the way you think it is or the way you think it should be, you can right click and reset that. So I've got my linear gradient. It's going from black to white. If we look at the mask, we see the mask is white, so wherever the gradient is black, it's going to hide that. So I'll just start maybe right here in the image and start dragging down. Now all of this we can change, so I can go ahead and rotate this, I can make it longer, I can do whatever I want, but for now this will be just fine. I'm actually going to go in and change it in a minute, and you'll see why. So we've got our stage kind of set, and I want to add the first prop, which is this car. Now, this to me is pretty incredible how good select subject and remove background has gotten. So in the past, we had earlier algorithms and they've both been updated. So if you go to Photoshop and then go to settings, or if you're on Windows and you go to the edit menu and then settings, and you come down here to image processing, right here under select subject and remove background, I've got it set to cloud because that's probably going to give me a better result. If you don't have access to the cloud, like if you don't have internet connectivity, you can set this to the device. Both of these have been recently upgraded and they're doing a pretty darn amazing job. So I'm going to set that to cloud. And I'm just going to give you one other tip while we're in here. There is a new area called notifications. And if you enable quiet mode, then you won't be distracted by like rich tooltips or what's new or future onboarding stuff. You can also turn off your tooltips. So I think as a beginner, these can be super helpful to have them enabled. But if you're trying to focus and concentrate, you can disable those by you can disable them by enabling quiet mode and turning off tooltips. All right. So I'm going to choose to remove the background on this layer. I could choose to select subject. That would just select the subject. Then I would need to make the mask. So when I choose remove background, Photoshop's going to go up to the cloud, analyze the image, remove the background, and then create the mask for me. And look at this. I mean, if I do Command 1, it's done a really good job. I mean, yes, okay, right here in the windshield, maybe not as much. So let's go ahead and zoom in. And I'm going to tap the P key, and that's going to give me my pen tool. So I think that even with all of the AI that's now in Photoshop, it's great to have. And with one click, it can probably get you 90% of the way there. But your old school tools are still really important. So I'm just going to click once. And here's a little tip with the pen tool. If you click and your mouse is still down, you can hold the space bar and actually reposition that point if you want to. So now this I've let go and we can come over here. I've also got my line set to be a little bit thicker. And you do that just here under the gear icon. So you can set the thickness so that you can see it a little bit better. You can also change the color if you wanted to. All right, let's just hold down the Option key because I need to break the direction line so we can go in a different direction. And I would just come all the way around here and we can click and drag out here to get a nice curve, come down here and just remove because I don't want this windshield in the way. So that's why I'm taking out like all of this part too. It's a surreal composite, so it doesn't matter to me if that is showing or not. So once you have your path created, then if you go to your paths panel, you've got your work path. And at the very bottom, you can click on the icon that looks like the marching ants, and that will convert your path into a selection. So we already have a mask on this layer, and I want to hide this area. So all I need to do is go to the paint bucket right here and just fill this with black, and it will hide that. And then we can deselect that. So there are some other areas, if I just zoom back out a little bit, maybe some more, like this area back here that I don't really want in the image, and maybe this front fender. So again, it got me 90% of the way there. So when I'm initially making my composite, like maybe I'm not even sure if I want to use this car, I will definitely use either select subject or remove background while I'm basically figuring out the composition. But because this is a car and it's got such smooth curves and there's some areas that I want to take out, I've actually created a path around the entire car, which you can see there in blue, right? So it doesn't include this area here, and it doesn't include this area over here, and it kind of cuts back some of the wheel underneath. So it's up to you, if select subject works, for me, it always works with ideation, and then I can go in if I need to and use something like the pen tool. And for this image, because I like to print things large, this image is what, 20 by 20 at 300. So it's 6K by 6K. This is a pretty large file, so I want to make sure that my selections are really good. All right, I'm going to cancel out of there. So we already have this mask, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the path around the entire car, not as a selection, but as a mask. So if I have the path targeted, which we do in the path panel, then I can go up to the layer menu and choose vector mask and then current path. And we can see that it has added a vector mask. And the great thing about this is that it's completely non-destructive when you scale it. So I could scale the car down and up and down and up. And where the raster mask, this layer mask, is going to be interpolated up and down and up and down and might get soft, the vector mask never will. Okay, so I've got my car. Let's click off of the path there. I've got my car isolated, and we'll zoom out a bit. The thing is, I want to harmonize the car with that background. And I don't need both of these masks. Well, I thought I didn't need both of these masks. But if I click harmonize right now and I don't have this mask, it's not going to work properly. So let me just show you. If I choose to delete the layer mask and I only have the vector mask, you'll notice one, harmonize is now just this little icon here. I can still grab it under layer and then harmonize, but believe me when I say, if I choose to do this, it's not going to pay attention to this mask. It's as if this mask isn't here. So I'm going to use Command Z so that I still have this raster mask, but they don't really match, right? So how would I get a copy of this mask as my raster mask? I can right click and we can just delete this layer mask and then just hold down the command key or the control key and see how my little icon goes to the marching ants with the hand. So if I just click on that, it's loaded that mask as a selection. And now we can just click on the mask icon. So hopefully I didn't confuse you there, but I think it's something that some of you might run into. If you work with vector masks all the time and you try to harmonize, it's not going to work right now. So hopefully in the future it will, but right now it won't. So you need this other mask. You need the raster mask because that's going to cut out the car and enable the car to be harmonized with the layers below it. Okay, so with the car layer thumbnail targeted, I will choose to harmonize. So what harmonize is doing is it's going to change the colors in your image to try to harmonize them. So it's going to try to change the shading, the lighting, and also add any shadows or any reflections. Now, this is a very softly lit scene, so it's not super impactful in my opinion. So let's see what it does. Okay, there we go. So it creates this like reflection in the ice, but it doesn't really change the color of the image too much. And we do get 3 variations that we can choose from. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So I would probably go with number 1. But let me just scoot to Lightroom Classic for a moment and move to this harmonize because I just want to show you that it really does do a good job on images where there is definite like directional light. So in this image, I just put that glass there and it really looks quite fake, especially down at the bottom of the glass bottle. But after running Harmonize, it looks much better. Okay, and here, look at, I just like copied and pasted that boot in and it looks terrible. Excuse me, it looks terrible, but when I use Harmonize, it looks much better. And just one more example, here is this truck and the lighting is all wrong for the nice kind of soft light in the background. So again, that's using Harmonize. So just a few different examples. Now, you might still only get 90% of the way there, in which case you can go in and you can just dodge and burn a little bit more, right? So there's 1 and 2. All right, so that just, it should get you so much closer, so much faster. And in the case of what we're doing here, it actually made me think, oh, maybe I don't want just a, because I was just going to put a shadow there. I wasn't going to necessarily do the reflection. But I think most of you can probably see what's happened to the car, right? Because this image is so large and the results that are returned by the harmonized generative AI are lower resolution, we're losing a lot of the quality in the car, right? If I toggle this layer off, there it is, the original, and there it is after it's been harmonized. But we don't have to use the car, right? I just want to grab the shadow here or the reflection. So in order to do that, again, we'll use that same shortcut, the Command or Control key on Windows, and click on a layer mask to load up the mask of the car, then move to the harmonize layer. And all we need to do is fill that with black so that it hides it. And we get our car nice and sharp because it's hiding the harmonized layer, but we can still see the harmonized results down in this area. We would also probably want to do that to the snow. And then, so let's go ahead and do that. How would we do that to the snow? Well, the snow is right here on this layer. So let's hide the car layer for a minute. And let's just grab our, it's the W key, it's Object Select. And I've got it set to rectangle. And I'm going to deselect and then just drag out loosely around this bottom ice. And then it will shrink wrap the selection to that ice. So let's turn back on the car layers, go back to harmonization and the harmonized layer, what was that? Harmonized layer, and then fill that with black as well, and that would get it rid of anything down in this area as well. Okay, so let's deselect that. And because if I do zoom into 100% and we scroll down, you can see that it's just not quite the quality, like it's a little pixelated there. So I might just quickly right click, turn this into a smart object, and then we can go up here to the filter menu and come down to our blurs and just do a little Gaussian blur, right? Maybe like 10 or so. And what that'll do is it'll just blur this so that we don't get that pixelized area, but we still have a nice reflection. Okay, so that's one way to do it. But if we also want to go old school, we can do it old school. So if we don't want to use the harmonize later, we can just turn that off. And instead, I would want to create a shadow and then also the reflection. So how would I do that? Well, let's zoom into 100%. And on the layers panel, I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to tap the B key to give me my brush tool, and I want a rather hard edge brush, and I want it quite small. So I'll just get the size that I want. I'll make sure that I'm painting with black, and I'm just going to draw, like here at the bottom of the tire, a little bit smaller. That was a little too big. A little bit shorter than where I think the contact shadow should be. Right, so I'm just going to drag that over, drag that over. There's a teeny one over here, and then one right here that I can add. That, I should probably change my path. That looked a little sharp right there, but that's okay. So here we are on layer 1. Again, I'll convert it to a smart object, and that just enables me when I go to Gaussian blur and I add this blur, it makes it more flexible so I could go back at any time and redo the blur. So 10 pixels, yeah, let's start with 10 pixels. I'll click OK. And then I'm just going to use my move tool and move it up a little bit so it looks a little bit closer to the tire. And then I'm going to move this layer below the car layer, right? So it's below it. It's so that I'm not putting any shadow on the tires themselves. Then we'll just create another new layer, right? And this time I'll get a little bit larger of a brush. So I'll tap the B key, get a little bit larger of a brush. And we could go ahead and add another one that's just a little bit bigger and a little bigger there. It's just going to give me a little bit more of a change in the shadow. Okay, so again, right click, and then we can convert to a smart object, go back to filter, and then Gaussian blur, and let's do like maybe 30 on this one. Okay, great. So now I've got a good contact shadow. Let's do one more layer. Click the plus icon here, get a really big brush here. Maybe that's too big. And let's go ahead and start with this one a little more feathered, maybe there, because we need the shadow of the whole car, right? So let's say I just drag this across. Okay, and I'm holding down the shift key and let's see if it'll scroll for me. There it is. Oop, okay, that was a little too long. So let's go Command 0. Let's do that one again. Let's go right. How about along there? Okay, again, just right click and then say, hey, let's go ahead and convert to a smart object. And when I choose filter here, I'm actually holding down the Option key or the Alt key, and that's what's bringing up the Gaussian blur dialog. Otherwise, it would just apply it at with the same settings as were applied last time. But now I really want to, yeah, let's really blur that quite a bit. I'll click OK, and that's just too much, right? If I do Command 0, too much of a shadow. So let's bring down the opacity. So on that layer right there, we can just decrease the opacity, and I might add a mask to that as well, just grabbing my brush tool again, getting it a little bit bigger and maybe doing like 30% or so, and just take a little bit away the front and the back, just about like that. Okay, so those are all of my shadows. So let's just tuck them into their own group. So they're all targeted on the layers panel, and we can use Command G on Mac or Control G on Windows. There's our group. And there is our first shadow. Now to do the reflection, I think I might have reduced that a little bit too much. Let's go back to that one again. Let's try like 70. All right, well, we'll see how that looks when we add our reflection. All right, so there's my shadow. Now, how do we add the reflection? Well, we can just make a duplicate of this layer. And since we're not using Harmonize, I'll just go ahead and delete that layer mask as well. And then use Command J or Control J to duplicate that and just put that, let's put that down below the shadow. It's actually out of the car group now, but I don't think that'll matter. And before I start distorting it, I'll right click and again, convert to smart object because that's going to give me the most amount of flexibility. So Command or Control T, and then look right here in my contextual taskbar, we can just flip this, right? So Command or Control T is the shortcut for free transform because I want to transform this. We could have grabbed that by going to edit and then free transform as well. All right, now let's bring this down. I'm holding down the shift key so it goes straight down. And let's position it there. Now I need to distort this, right? I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. So I'm just going to start dragging this up and I'm going to distort it by holding down the shift key. And let's just make it about there. Okay. And then we can use our move tool with our little arrows and just scoot that, nudge it down a little bit. Okay. But it's not blurred, right? And I need to blur this. So that's why I have it again set as a smart object so that when I add my filter, it'll add it as a smart filter and it will be re-editable. But this time I'm not going to add Gaussian blur. I'm going to go to the blur gallery and I'm going to add a tilt shift blur. Why? Because a Gaussian blur blurs all the pixels the same amount. If you're actually trying to add depth to your image, use like the blur gallery because it will actually blur the area that is closer to this white line here. It will blur this a little bit and then more and more and more until it gets to this dotted or not, I guess, dashed line. So the pin in the middle is going to allow me to add more or less blur. I can reposition this. So let's say I reposition it right down to about here. Well, between the pin and this first white line, you're going to get no blurring. So I'm going to want to move that up because I want the blur to start happening before the tires, right? Like I don't need this part of the tire to be super sharp. I need it to still be blurred a little bit because really this is ice. And so you wouldn't get a crisp reflection. And then I'm just going to move up this dotted or this dashed line right up here. So that tells Photoshop that between the solid line and the dashed line, it's got to go from 0 blur to 100% of whatever I dialed in using either the pin here or over on the right-hand side, the amount of blur here. So I think I'm happy with that amount of blur. So let's go ahead and hit OK and apply that. Again, I can change my mind at any time and come back in if I want to because it's non-destructive. Then it's far too much, right? So I need to decrease the opacity. So here I've got the layer targeted, and if I have the move tool selected, we can just tap like 5, that gives me 50%, or we can go ahead and use the slider here. I'm just going to bring that down quite a bit there, maybe a little bit more. How's right about there? Okay. Now, I don't want it to reflect in the snow area, correct? Right? So I'm going to return by tapping the W key or by selecting the object selection tool, going back down to that same background. All right. And I'm going to turn off sample all layers here. I've got the background and I'm just going to drag again over that to select it. It's going to shrink wrap it down. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. We can turn back on the car, or the car is actually on right now. So let's go to this is the copy, which I should rename, right? So this is going to be the reflection so that I can keep my layers straight. And then if I just add my mask now, it's going to just show the snow, and I want the opposite, right? So I'm going to invert it by clicking on the little icon on the contextual taskbar, and now I can add my mask, and that will remove it. It will remove the reflection from the snow. Okay, great. And I might also just return real quick to that shadow. It's this shadow right here that's quite the large one, right? So let's grab that and let's just move that down a bit. So I'm just using the shift key and just moving that down, and I might move it a little bit to the left as well. Okay. All right, so that's looking better. I could even bring it down a bit more. Okay. All right, great. So we've got our car done. And next is the polar bear. So the polar bear was really fun. Of course, I don't have a photograph of a polar bear driving a car, but what do I have a picture of? I have a picture of a polar bear that is jumping. So I'm going to use this portion of the polar bear and maybe the arm to be driving the car, but then I needed a second image of a bear's head. So how do we do this? The way I would do it to keep it flexible is first remove the background. Okay, so this gives me a really nice, clean cutout of the bear, right? So here he is. It looks great. Now I need to make sure that he's in the car. I could put him below the car, but I actually want the fur to come over the edge of the car. So I don't want to destroy this mask. So I'm going to create a group. So just clicking the folder icon here, this little guy is going to be in the group now. And I'm going to add a mask to the group. And so what this does is it lets me leave the extracted polar bear alone, but still mask more of the polar bear. So let's take the opacity of the layer down, maybe like 50 or something. And I'll tap the B key to get my brush. And I want a pretty hard edge brush here. So I'll drag down to get a hard edge brush. And let's go back up to 100% by tapping the 0 key. That just sets the opacity up here to 100. And now let's just start taking them away, right? So a huge brush takes all that away really quickly. A little smaller brush by just tapping on the right bracket. And we'll just bring that up like this. Okay, and maybe a little bit more away from that area there. And I'll leave his paw. All right, let's bring that back to 100%. Now I'm going to use generative fill to create the hair here. I could try to find other hair like from up here, copy it and paste it, but I'm going to use generative fill in a minute. First, let's figure out how we're going to get the head on there. So here's the bear head layer. Again, removing the background. So I've got this nice extracted mask right here. That's great. I'm going to add another group so I can get that second mask and put this layer in that group. And then I'll add a mask to that group. Let's set this down to maybe 50%, just using the layers panel here so we can kind of see through it. So now I know if I'm painting with black, I know that I don't want any of this and probably none of this. And then I'm not sure how much hair here I'm going to want, but then I'll kind of come up here and go up the flow of the body. Okay, so I could paint that. I could have used the lasso tool or any of the other selection tools, whatever you want to use. And then I might just check my mask. So option click to just check that and go, oopsie, yep, I probably missed that stuff. All right, and then just click on the eye icon again. And we'll bring that up to 100%. Excellent. So obviously we can't have it, well, we could have a two-headed bear, but I'm going to get rid of that other head. So I'm going to go back to the first bear, right, and that mask and just paint that out there. All right, great. And then I'm going to return to the second bear, which is the bear head, and let's change the opacity of the brush to like, I don't know, 30% or so. So I tap the 3 key, and because I have the brush, it changes the opacity. And now I'm still painting with black, but now we can come in and start making these hairs look a little more realistic, right? Coming over here and over here like that. All right, now I'm not going to worry too much about that because we can always make changes to that later. And I'm going to put like this little scarf around his neck. So I'll worry about that a little later. Again, I want to make sure that when I'm like doing the rough composite where I'm just like, will this work? Will this image work? Do I like the car? I'm not going to spend so much time getting into the details. I want to make sure that the whole composite works before I start refining things like colors. Because, okay, for example, if I had worked a long time on this background, right, of this ice, well, I just did a quick fade to make sure that the car would fit. Once I see that the car will fit, now I can go back and refine that. So in fact, I'm going to select all in the mask, and I'm just going to fill that with white. All right, because I don't like the way that the gradient was so gradual. And then I'm going to tap the L key, and that's just going to give me my selection brush. Or we could grab the lasso tool, whichever you're more comfortable in, and deselect. And I'm just going to kind of drag like a little bit of a curve line here, and maybe it goes down, and then maybe it just goes up a little bit over here. All right, so I'm selecting all of this because I want to get rid of it all, because now that I know how the bear's sitting and everything, I've got a better idea for what I want the foreground to be. So if I just click the mask though, not good. It's going to, well, there's actually already a mask on there, so I can't even do that. So let's just fill that again with black to hide that area. Okay, and then deselect. Now, one thing that I'll want to be checking is the edges. So the edges like of this ice are a little bit soft. And of course, the edge of the bear, while we see all the hairs, it's still a little bit softer. So if I want to add a non-destructive feather to the selection that I just made, this ice back here, we can do that by using the properties panel. As long as we're on the layers mask, we can increase the feather, right? And as I increase this, you see that edge getting softer and softer. So I'm just going to add a slight feather, like 1.8, less than 2 pixels. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the car. So I'm going to move up to the car, grab the car, and even though it's a vector mask, we can still add a feather to it. So I'm just going to add a smidge of a feather on that. And it's just going to make it look like, it's going to help unify them so that they don't look like they're just cut out with like some scissors. Okay, so we are now done with the car. I can close that group. We're done with the polar bear. We'll come back for the hair, but let's quickly get the rest of the elements in the image. So what else do we have? We've got some birds. Wait, why didn't the car? Oh, this car, the reflection isn't actually in that group. So to put it in the group, I'll just drag it up there because I like to keep my layers panel nice and tidy. So we have this first bird. There's two here. I'm going to return to my object selection tool and just drag over it so that it knows exactly when I want to select. And then we can go ahead and add the mask. That doesn't look like a very good selection. I'm going to do that again. Oh, you know why? Maybe because I turned off sample all layers. Let's try that again. I'm going to do that again. There we go. I don't know why, because it had never failed me doing that before, but sometimes you just have to look at some of the tools. You know, sometimes select subject works well. Sometimes the object selection tool works better. You just, if one doesn't work, try another one. Okay, so we just have to add our mask. Boom, that hides the other bird. And we've got one more here. And I'm just going to do the same thing, drag over it. There we go. It shrink wraps it and add my mask. So I like these two birds. I really like that this bird is looking down at the bear and this one's kind of looking maybe a little bit more forward. It really helps to kind of take your eye up and then forward over here. So the thing is, I need something to anchor the left side of the image. So now that we have our birds, I'll close that. So what do I have? I have some reindeer antlers. And I thought, well, this will be fun. I'll use the little antlers as the hood ornament. So again, with the object selection tool, let's see if it will select those antlers. And it does a great job. So we can add our mask. Okay. Oops, added it to the wrong thing. Let's make sure we're on the right layer and add our mask. Okay. Now, remember when we used harmonize, and because this is such a large image, it was like, oh man, the resolution wasn't quite there. But look, if I want to use harmonize to harmonize the reindeer antlers with the background, I can do that by duplicating the file. So first, I'm just going to make sure that they have a really great mask as far as the car goes. So again, I'm just going to command click on the car. Now, I know you're thinking, well, why don't you just put the reindeer antlers below the car? Because when you harmonize, I want to harmonize the antlers. It makes more sense to me to harmonize the antlers to the rest of the scene. So I want the antlers to be on top. So I'm going to command click, that loads the car as a selection, and then we can go to the mask for the reindeer, and then we'll just use the fill with black. Okay, great. Then I'm going to go to image, and I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate the whole thing, right? So let's duplicate it into a new document. Why? Because I'm only working with a small area of this document. In fact, I don't need harmonize, I don't need the sash, I don't need the polar bear, the cloud, the crown and emblem. I don't need any of those. So I'm going to tap delete. Okay, that gets rid of those. And now, oh, I probably don't need the birds either. And honestly, I don't need the polar bear because what I'm going to do in this duplicate is I'm going to select the crop tool and I'm just going to crop out this area right here, right? So I'm going to crop, I shouldn't say crop out, I'm going to crop into this area. So let's get that to crop. And I threw away those other layers because it's going to take less time to crop if I have fewer layers in the document because these are all smart objects, they're all huge files. Okay, so now it's cropped it. So now we can go Command 1. So now we're at 100%, right? And I've got my reindeer layer right here, and I want to harmonize it with all of the layers underneath it. So instead of the harmonize having to create or generate content that is 6,000 pixels wide, now it's only going to have to generate content that's 2,000 pixels wide. So I'll get better results. All right, so let's grab our move tool and we've got the reindeer targeted and let's hit harmonize. So I hope that makes sense that this is a little workaround. I'm just doing a portion of my image so that when it returns its results, it doesn't have to upsample it so much. So I'm going to get better results. Okay, if we look at our properties panel, this is where it's going to generate the 3 layers. And what do we have? Here's our first, second, and third. Okay, so they're pretty subtle this time around. I could say generate again, but I do like this. So see how it's just generated that little bit of a shadow? Yeah, well, for time's sake, you get the idea. I'm going to take this one layer now back to the reindeer, and we can just drop that in. So here it comes in right here, and now I can just drag this over, and let's go to 100%. And you probably know that if you want to see if something is in alignment, you can change the blend mode to difference. And then we can use the move tool and see like, okay, so let's move this into position and see where I get them aligned. So when you get them aligned, they should be nice and black. So there we go. That's aligned. Now let's switch this back from difference to normal. Now it does have a few other areas that it is adjusting, right? If I toggle off all the other layers, there's this other stuff up here and I don't want that. So I'm just going to go to the mask really quickly. And let's select our brush tool by tapping the B key. I'm painting with black and let's tap 0. So I'm painting with 100% and we'll just get rid of that. So all I really want is the shadow. That's all I'm using. And you can see it's actually quite small, but it would give me a much better shadow. So I'll toggle those back on and there we have it. So there's without and with, or if I toggle on the previous antlers, there's just the little shadow it added. So kind of small, but the theory is what I hope you understand that, if you're working with large files, you can always duplicate them and then just work on a smaller area of that file so that you can get better resolution. Okay, so I'll close that. Command 0. So what else do we have in here? Oh, we have a crown and an emblem. So let's go grab those. So here's the crown that I tried to make with Gen Fill. And actually, if you look at the properties, it says place a royal looking golden crown on the dog's head. Make it elegant and simple, worthy of royalty. So the reason I stuck this in here, because I actually knew what crown I wanted to use, but I had a different image with a dog and I was trying to put a crown on the dog's head. So even if you don't use the information that's generated, if you like it, just save it out to its own document, right? You've already used the generative fill and you've already taken the time and you've already used your credits to generate something. So just save it to a different document because you never know when you might use it. Okay, but we don't want it for this image because I like this crown better. So again, tapping the W key and then just going in and selecting. There is our crown, and we're going to add a little mask here, and then I've got an emblem here, and we can do the same thing right down here on the emblem, and then create our mask. Excellent. So we have our two things, but they need some drop shadows. So let's go into 100%. I'll start with the crown, and I'm going to use the effects this time. So here we can add a drop shadow. Now, the first shadow, and you'll notice, look, there's two in here. So a lot of these effects, you can click on the plus icon and add more than one shadow. So if I show the first one, we can see this is a harder edge shadow. All right, so the size is smaller, the distance is smaller, and the opacity is greater. So this is more like the contact shadow, right? And then we've got another shadow here that is looser. All right, and I think I just want to move that a little bit. Maybe there, all right? And I can go ahead and increase the size of that so it's a little bit softer, maybe about 16. Let's see. Let's do 20 there, okay? And then the distance, let's see if we move that a little further or a little bit closer. Yeah, I like it a little bit further. All right, let's do that. And the opacity, I think is good. I don't think I want that any darker. Okay, so we've added these two layer effects, but of course we see there's a problem, and that is we've got this drop shadow, happening as if there was like a flash taking a picture and then it's a fake wall behind it. So we need to get rid of that. But before we get rid of that, why don't we copy these effects to the other layer? So I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key and just drag this to the emblem. So now I have those same two drop shadows on the emblem down here, but I don't need both of them. So if I toggle on and off the eye icon, we can see that I really want this drop shadow, not both of them. So we can just dump this one by throwing it in the trash. All right, now let's get back to the crown. So what are we going to do? Because I need to mask the shadow so that we can't see it on the background. Well, if we right click, we can choose to create layers, and that will convert our two drop shadows into their own layers. Then we can select those layers on the layers panel, and then we can use that Command G or Control G to group them as our shadows. All right, so here's our DOWS shadows. Okay, then we can add a mask to that group, right? So we still have those shadows, they're right in here. Here is our group. We tap the B key to get our brush, and then we paint with black. And let's get a little smaller of a brush here. We don't want the shadow on the background there or there. And then I think I do see, yeah, there's a little bit of a problem right here. This is actually with the crown layer. So I'm going to go, this one is the crown, and make sure I have the mask targeted. And let's do our object select. Let's see if it'll just, instead of me drawing, will you just select that little area right there? There we go. Great. So let's just fill that with black. Okay, terrific. Now let's go ahead and zoom back out and deselect that. All right, we've got our crown and our emblem. I need something else in that sky though, so I wanted to add this little cloud. With the cloud targeted, I'll tap the L key and that'll give me my selection brush. Let's just do basic circle around there, and then it will fill that in. And now we can add our mask because the pink is what is selected. So we add our mask, there's our cloud, and let's set this to the screen blend mode. But of course, we still see all of this area here that is not going away. So we could definitely paint with a brush and try to get rid of it, or we can just double click to the right of the layers panel, right? And then here, I'm going to go into the blending options, and I'm just going to say, if the current layer is darker, I'm just going to get rid of that. But it's very pixelated, so I'll hold the Option key or the Alt key, and then just drag this back until I like the cloud. So I like the cloud except for here. So I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to tap the B key to get my brush and make sure that I'm on my mask. Get a big brush here, maybe go down, well, I'll start at 100% and then tap 5 and go down to 50% and just get rid of any more of that cloud that I don't like. All right, great. So let's start working on the polar bear fur, right? We gotta clean this up a little bit. So I'm gonna tap L again. That'll take me to my quick select brush, and let's get a little bigger brush and just go right down here, right there. And then I'm gonna use generative fill, and I'm gonna just type in polar bear fur. Tap enter return. Let's see what that does. Oh, this is with Flux Context Pro. So I didn't look at the model that I was using. So I'm not sure if this is going to give me what I want. I think that Firefly model is probably going to do a little bit better job. Yeah, see, I only get one variation and I don't really like that fur. So let's change the model, and we can do this on the properties panel or on the contextual taskbar. Let's change that to Firefly and let's hit generate again. Now, I've generated a whole bunch of additional layers because I didn't want to take up all this time because it does take some time to generate them. But let's see. Okay, that's much better. So now we have 1 version, 2 version, and 3 version. I kind of like the second one. Yeah, I like that. So then I would just go around and come up over here and do the same thing, right? Like polar bear fur right there, and maybe some polar bear fur right there. Ooh, that mask needs to go away. Let me go back to the polar bear for a moment. And that is on the head, and that little area, I'm going to deselect that and use my brush and just get rid of that. I just didn't do quite a good enough job removing that area right there. Is that set to 100%? No, let me undo that. I'm going to tap 0, set that to 100%, come right down there. Okay, that looks a little better. All right, so we can close the polar bear, back up here to polar bear fur, tap the wet key. I'm trying to get the selection brush, that's the L. There we go, and then let's just drag that and drag this right here. Okay, and we'll do the same thing, generative fill and polar bear fur. Great. So then the problem was that paw, right? That paw doesn't look very good. And so I actually used Firefly again to use a generative fill again to create the polar bear's hand. So let's see. Okay, let's see the fur. That's good. Ooh, that's great. I like that one the best. All right. So we got our polar bear fur all the way around, but what about this paw? So to save time, you can see that I generated it. It says polar bear claw resting on the side of a car. And I came up, there were 2 good ones that I thought. There was this one right here. Let's toggle that on. So there was this one and then that one. I don't like that one as much, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one. And then I needed this other hand, and this actually was more of a problem than I thought. Let me just show you what I eventually came up with was this. But you'll notice this does not have the same icon here as generative fill. And that's because even going through all the different partner models, so the Gemini or Nano Banana, as well as the Flux Context Pro and Firefly, I couldn't get it to generate. So what I did is I took a screenshot of the image. Okay, let's go back to Lightroom for a minute so I can show it to you. Here it is right here. I took this screenshot of the image and then I used it as a reference image, but not in Photoshop, but in Firefly instead. You're thinking, what's Firefly? If we go to Safari and I go to Firefly, this is firefly.adobe.com, and I can create and edit images here. So I can generate images, I can generate videos, I can make Firefly boards, all sorts of things. So what I did is I went to generate image and I loaded up that polar bear as the reference image. And then I could pick from all of these different options, including the Firefly Image 5 preview. So if I return and we go back to my stuff right here, and I go to my favorites, we can see that it generated this image right here. And this image was exactly what I wanted because I wanted this paw and I couldn't get it to happen in Photoshop. So sometimes you have to try maybe more than one tool. So then I just downloaded it, right? You can just download it. And then I brought it into Photoshop and then I just masked that so that we got that little guy's hand. All right. Okay, so that is all the polar bear fur. Then we've got the sash here, and I've got a few more minutes. So let's look at what I came up with the sash. So this is using, you can see right here, Flux Context Pro. So I selected the polar bear area. In fact, you can see the area that I selected right here. This is this whole area. All right, and I just asked it to place a regal order sash around the neck of the bear in a deep royal blue with an elaborate silver snowflake-shaped insignia suspended from it. And this is what it came up with. It also came up with this one, but I don't care for that one as much, so I'm going to go for this one. Then you can see, though, what happened. Where's the crown, right? Because I picked this big area. If we Command or Control click, that is the area that I had selected, right? So if I go to the marching or the marquee tool, we can see I selected this whole area and then I entered that prompt. So it regenerated that whole area, but all I want is the sash. So I'm just going to go over here to my object selection tool, drag around the sash. It will go ahead and, oh, well, it missed one area there, but we can go in. Let's go in with my lasso tool, like a real lasso tool. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm just going to subtract this area here from what is selected. Okay, so now I just have the sash selected. So let's add a mask. So on the contextual taskbar, there's my mask. And when I hide the rest of that layer, all of that other information comes back. So that's awesome. But I didn't like the silver little dangly filigree. So again, I went over to Firefly to just create an element. So here I was, if we go back to my settings, here are my favorites. So I did one on white, and I thought this was really interesting because when I did it on white and I brought it over to Photoshop, it did not extract it from the background. But when I did it on blue and I did it on red, it did. So again, this is just like, you go to the image, again in Firefly, you can download it. Oh, where is it? Right there. And you just hit downloads and it'll go to your downloads folder. Of course, I've already done that and brought it into Photoshop. Oh, I brought the red one in, but that's okay. Actually, the red one's better because it has the problem. So here's where if you use like remove background, it just didn't do it. Like, I don't know what it was thinking, but it didn't do it. So it did not remove the background. So then I thought, well, what about select subject? And if I zoom in, it does select the subject. So let's try to mask that. Ah, but see, it didn't pick up that background area, which I thought was really weird. So I'm going to hit undo and deselect. And this is what I mean by trying other tools. I went to object select, and I think because I'm helping it say, hey, this is the object, it does an amazing job selecting this. So when I add my mask, look at that, it's gorgeous. So then I can just use Command T or Control T, and we can just transform this down. And I probably want it about that size, but of course I need to get rid of this one. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back to the bear. I'll tap the J key, or we could select the removal tool. Where are we here? Right here, remove tool. I'm just going to paint right over this little area here. And I'm going to have it remove it. That will be lovely. Oh, I didn't quite get it all, so let's grab that as well. Have it remove that. Terrific. I've got it set so that it removes after each stroke, and it's going to create a new layer, so that's why we see those layers. Go back to my little filigree and tap the V key with the move tool. And, oops, let's undo that. Come on, give me the move tool right here. And then we'll just scoot that up right here. And then I just have one more thing to do to make sure that this all comes together. So I'm going to zoom up again. And I probably need to remove that as well. But I just want to point out, look at how much noise there is in the background. There's hardly any noise in the bear. There's less noise in this generated content. And then there's a little bit more noise in the car. So in order to bring all of these elements together, I am going to go up to harmonize. And I just have, instead of adding grain to the whole image, I just have a scan of a piece of paper. Now it's finely textured. Is it a scan? I think it's a photo, but regardless, it's a piece of paper. And in order to see through this paper, but still add the texture, I could choose either overlay or soft light, right? So overlay is going to add more contrast and soft light is going to add less contrast. So I would probably choose soft light for this image, Then we can, of course, go in and change the opacity as well if I think that's too much. But now you can start to see where the generated items have a bit of a texture. This background has a texture. Everything is looking much more unified with all of those textures. So let's just Command 0 and scoot back. Command 0 and scoot back. And I could go in and just, okay, one more thing, and then I know I'm out of time, but I would go in with a curves adjustment layer at this point. So I'll just come down to curves. Curves can be as big as you want now, which is really nice. If you take it out of this panel, you can go ahead and make it like, you never used to be able to extend the curve, but it just enables you so much more control. But I just want a simple curve. I'm just going to darken down the curve on the whole image. And then let's go and grab our gradient tool again, this time black to white, but I want it to be radial. I'll pick somewhere like in the center, scoot this on out. Excellent. Reposition it, maybe like that. If I wanted it a little bit more abrupt of a transition, right, we can scoot this out. I want it pretty soft though, so I'll bring it there. And then let's go ahead and we can close that properties panel if we want to. Tap the F key once and twice. Oh, let's get off of that layer and then tap it again. I want a little more paper texture in there. I'm just going to increase that a little bit more. And how about that curve? Do I need to decrease that curve a little bit more? Maybe, but there we go. I think we are finished. So tap F once and F twice. And there we go. So, oh, I don't like that bottom part. I know Dave is gonna, just have to do one last thing here. I have to get back out of here. I have to go to this mask on curves, pick up my brush again, pick up a big brush. It just made this whole area down here way too dark. So I'm just gonna paint it right out of there. And then I know I'm out of time, paint it out of there. And there we go. So I hope that was helpful, maybe a little inspirational and hopefully educational. My name's Julieanne Kost. Thanks for joining me.